I just want to say before beginning the talk that I wrote this TED talk before all that is happening in America right now. So there is any reference to that. And I'm really happy that all those protests and this the world is actually changing. So I want to begin with this. On Tuesday, 13th of March at 4 in the afternoon, my father called me from Italy and said that the last plane I booked for Thursday was cancelled and that the plane to Italy was in 2 hours. I took only my laptop and the documents necessary to leave the country, and I went to the airport on the subway. In 6 hours, my daily life had completely turned upside down. When I left Italy as an international student, I would have never thought that I have to go back to Italy for a global pandemic, but that's exactly what happened. Within a day, I had to leave everything I had and the life I had created to return to my life of 2 years ago. Fortunately, I took the last plane that left New York for Italy before they announced a complete lockdown due to the spread of the coronavirus. My mother had been calling me agitated for days, saying that I absolutely had to come back. But I had classes, commitments, and for weeks while the virus was spreading in Italy, I said no. I waited. I went to school, I went to Manhattan, and I waited. Now I really can say that you always have to listen to your mothers. Because in one day, I had to leave my everyday life and come back to the frightened country of 2 months ago. I want to share a short video. So, quarantine has been and is hard for everyone. But in this TED talk, I really don't want to talk about the coronavirus itself that we already know in detail, but about what has happened and is happening in people's mind. At the beginning, I showed singing from the balconies, war, solidarity, aid, and cooperation happened. But where all this come from? I interviewed the psychologist Dr. Valeri, a doctor employed in the Sanity Institute of my city in the management section for the people infected, and I asked her something about the psychology behind the pandemic. The first thing that she brought up was social media. How important social media has been in this situation. We heard for years people complaining about how the kids lost their sociality to talk behind screens. But imagine what would have happened without social media. As Dr. Valeri explained to me, social network have saved us with the stability and the stability of the population. They spread the feeling of mass danger, and this helped a lot. She said that when the human mind perceives a danger that is aimed only at himself, he tends to isolate and run away from others to protect himself. Instead, when the danger is perceived as common, people tend to unite and cooperate. But of course, here the question arises. How can we join without the physical possibility of union? And this is exactly what the problem is about. To conduct this TED talk, I decided to read a book, A Paradise Built in Hell by Rebecca Solnit. This book focuses on the people response to catastrophe and analyzes the correlation between the type of situation and the response of the population. I would like to mention various global catastrophes, such as the San Francisco earthquake, where people escape from homes and physically join elsewhere, or hurricanes, where people escape and gather elsewhere to support and survive together. But now that we cannot join together physically to not spread the virus, what will happen? She said that the union will be stronger. Dr. Valeria explained to me that after each real catastrophe, the union that takes place does not last long. Cooperation diminishes because the feeling of needing others is limited to the moment following the catastrophe. On the other hand, during a pandemic, which is itself uncertain because it is not perceptible to the senses and lasts for a long period of time, psychologists think, and above all hope, that cohesion and a new way of solving problems will spread. But unfortunately, the union that happened in this period is not only the only sentiment that came out of people, but because selfishness has also prevailed in this situation. In Italy, we are in phase two, and despite the recommendation to not go out, we are seeing people around without masks. Everyone was frightened, including me. So I asked Dr. Valeri what was going on. In a very cold way, the doctor expressed her disappointment about the situation. Of course, it is normal that after 3 months of forced quarantine, people need to socialize to socialize, but it is not right that everyone's health is put at risk for the needs of the individual. According to the doctor, the selfishness of not wearing a mask is not connected to the coronavirus situation, but it is an attitude already rooted in those specific people. Whoever goes out today without a mask is the same person who yesterday would have not stopped to help a person in need in the street. But with this TED talk, I really don't want to blame someone. I want to send a message instead, a message of peace, acceptance, and trust in the human race. I hope that the coronavirus is over, but if it ever breaks out again, I fear what would happen in people's mind. Obviously, one of the most worrying effects is the sense of guilt. We would feel guilty for going out because we are let our need to socialize prevail over an emergency. Well, I want to debunk this idea because all this and what will happen is not anyone's fault. The coronavirus is a problem to keep always at the top of the list, but also mental health of the people who have lived for months in imprisonment really must be taken into consideration and analyzed in order to propose an efficient and refreshing solution for economically and mentally afflicted people. With this TED talk, I ask you all and the world to think twice when talking about someone and their way to cope from a difficult situation. I really want you to think about how incredibly difficult the psychology behind what we are living right now is. That the only way to survive is to keep joining and supporting each other as we did the first week of the pandemic, and not to fall in the temptation to give someone else a fault just for the pleasure of not feeling it on ourselves.